Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Keith. You don't let the music run long enough. You cut it off.
I didn't actually.
You're a disruptor, Keith.
I certainly
disruptive character. You not only disrupt the world, you've disrupted your own show. And appropriately enough, for that was the week of January the 29th, 2021. The theme is disruption. It seems as if everything, Keith, is being disrupted, from Wall Street to Silicon Valley to publishing to advertising. Is there anything, Keith, that isn't being disrupted this week, January 29th, 2021?
It's a crazy week, Andrew, isn't it? I mean, what an unbelievably mad week. You've got a 1.4 million Reddit group picking stocks in order to make hedge funds lose money on their short positions. You've got Apple calling out Facebook on privacy and about to launch the next version of their operating system for their iPhone and iPad that's going to make us all opt in to being tracked. You've got got Twitter buying Review and saying it's moving into newsletters, and you've got 89,000 households leaving San Francisco, which is a huge percentage of the city's population. So the world's going nuts.
I agree in part, the world is going nuts. But let's start with the big story of the week. Really fascinating story, this subreddit story about I don't know how you would call it, the inner workings of capitalism being blown up by subredditors, or that's what it seems from the outside. So explain the story, Keith, for idiots like me who don't understand the stock market.
Well, let's just start with what actually happened. This subreddit group is called Wall Street Bets.
And it seems to be linked with a writer based in Mexico City who is sort of pioneering the idea of blowing Wall Street up from the inside.
Right. Some people characterized it as the digital version of Occupy Wall Street. So basically, it's got 1.4 million people, and they all decided to buy the stock of GameStop, which was an almost bankrupt.
Well, hold on, Keith, slow down. Not all of them did. Some of them did. Not all 1.5 million.
They talked about doing it as a group, and then some of them actually did it. And they started buying, and it led to a 1,700% rise in the price of the stock. If we look today, right now at this stock, I can do it live. It's currently GameStop's up $131 today, which is 67%. If we click on it and just look over, let's change it to 1 month. The stock was at $18. It's been as high as 347, and it's currently at 323, and that is all driven by these purchases. Who are buying the stock of a failed company in order to drive its stock price up. Why? So that the hedge funds that had bet lots of money on the stock going down would lose their money. And indeed, a very big hedge fund, Citadel, I don't know if it's actually gone out of business or whether it's close to it, but it's in serious trouble because of this.
And there being this, whether we call it a crowd, a mob, or a gang of very smart investors, it depends how you look at this. They're being cheered on by some of the troublemakers of digital. Elon Musk loves it. And your friend, the distinguished venture capitalist who I can't pronounce with the long last name of P, also is into it, aren't they?
Yeah, and also Representative Cortez, AOC.
Ted Cruz and AOC are on the same. I'm not sure if they like this. What everybody seems to be opposed to are the short sellers of Wall Street, who are supposed to be the bad guys, but they're just doing business. Are they?
Well,
Is
actually,
there morality here, Keith? Is there good versus evil?
well, if you believe in capitalism, you have to believe that it's possible to bet for or against any enterprise, right?
But are they gaming? Do the short sellers? I mean, the essential argument, I think, within the subreddit community is that the short sellers of Wall Street are gaming the system, and that they use their financial muscle to essentially do away with the risk. Is that fair?
I think they do use their financial muscle to try to avoid risk. And what this proves is that technology has now got to the point where very large numbers of people can make them pay for that. So all's fair in love and war, in my opinion.
And to add to the sort of the irony, to me, the biggest irony is that they're driving up an archaic stock. But to add to the irony, the supposed democratizing fintech model of Silicon Valley, epitomized by Robinhood, is in the wrong camp on this front. They're using Robinhood as a platform to invest, and yet Robinhood switched it off because some people say there was pressure from Wall Street not to allow this. What's Robinhood's role in all this?
It isn't as conspiratorial as you would be led to believe. There's a really great article, actually, which I can put on screen, from Seeking Alpha that answers the question why brokers chose to halt trading in a short squeeze. And if you go and read this article, what it tells you is that Robinhood and its partners carry risk when short positions go so bad that there's a chance that the holder of the position can't actually pay the debt. And what happens in that situation is Robinhood has to carry the debt itself. So they stopped trading yesterday in order to avoid going into a bankruptcy situation themselves. They managed to negotiate overnight $1 billion onto their balance sheet from investors, and they reopened trading in the stocks this morning, and the stocks have continued to go up since reopening. So
are you arguing against your disruption premise of the week? I mean, is
no, I
now?
think the disruptors are the Reddit group. Robinhood is also a disruptor in some ways, but very different. And it isn't as much the bad guy in this as everyone thinks it is. It was looking after its own interests for sure, but it had more or less no choice due to its contracts.
And how can this end in tears for the subreddit group? Because Keith and I, you and I are both unfortunately old enough to remember back in the late 90s when every taxi driver in San Francisco was investing in Yahoo and Amazon, and every taxi driver in San Francisco lost their shirt in the big crash. How will the subredditors ultimately lose out? Because as we know, capitalism, particularly Wall Street, is a casino, and the house always wins, and these people are not the house, even if they sometimes think they are.
Well, they would lose if they cannot keep holding the stocks they've bought. A stock has something called a float. That is to say, there's only a certain number of shares available for sale of any given company. That's the float. If they can buy the entire float and not sell, the price will not go down. But if they can't buy the entire float, and if any of them start to sell, it will go down rather rapidly. So the question is, how long can they hold out using their own money to buy stocks that are not worth the price they're trading at in order to attack the shorts?
It's as if almost Louis Buñuel or some other surrealist or absurdist made a movie about online capitalism. It's absurd, isn't it? I mean,
it's absurd.
It could be, it's almost like a drama created by anarcho-capitalists.
It is, but it's a mathematically clever set of steps that they took. I mean, it's a bit like Bitcoin. There's only 21 million Bitcoin ever. So the logic is, as they're all owned, the price to own will go up. Well, that's the same in stocks. And no one ever really could put together a trading strategy that would benefit from how small a number of shares there are available, and then seek to punish a player by owning them. It's the first time it's happened, and now it's happened once, it'll happen a lot. If you're
And
a short,
it seems to me, again, maybe you'll correct me, that this is still a sideshow to the main act of Wall Street. Is it impacting the broader markets? Could it impact the broader markets?
well, typically shorting is a fairly small percentage of the entire market. It can get as high as 20 or 30% in some stocks, sometimes even higher than that. When that happens, these people can do damage to the holders of the short positions, but it's not going to damage Wall Street as a holistic entity. No, it won't.
Let's move on to Apple, Keith. You suggested that they are becoming major disruptors too. I'm less convinced by that. What are Apple up to this week?
So Apple, as we see here, I've got a few disruptions in this week's season. Let's click on the Apple one. This is a screenshot of exactly what they're going to do. Allow the NBA to track your activity across other companies' apps and websites. So do you want the NBA to know all the other things you're doing? You can say no, or you can say yes. Apple's bet is that when offered this option, which today you aren't asked, it just happens, most people will say, no, don't track me to other websites. Now, the business model of online advertising requires us to say yes to that question, because online advertising targets us by learning our tastes across numerous places we visit. I remember back in the day, I was a big fan of this. I'm going back 20 years now. I nearly created something called World ID, where you could put your interests and you could give permission to advertise to you as long as it was fitting with those interests. This is an automated way of doing the same thing using cookies, and Apple's going to block it if you opt not.
But this is the old story. There's been this growing imminent war between Apple and Facebook/Google on big tech business models. And it's in Apple's interest to undermine the advertising business and focus on getting people to pay for services and products. Isn't that fair? I mean, there's nothing particularly surprising about this move by Apple this week.
Yeah, nothing very new. It's HBO.
And Tim Cook is both, I think, economically and morally invested in this.
Yeah, it's HBO versus the network television with.
And in terms of disruption, I, as probably a more conservative than you, I actually am very much in the Apple camp. Are you? I mean, do we all need to choose a team on this one?
I am in the Apple camp. My view. I hate online advertising.
Even as a libertarian, Keith, a left libertarian. I mean, if people want to be watched, they want to be watched. They're happy to get stuff for free.
No, libertarians do approve of giving people choice, which is what this is doing.
Which is what Apple's doing. Although, as you say, it's not really choice, because when it comes down to it, no one's going to choose to be watched or followed. No one wants to be a product in surveillance capitalism.
Well,
and this is an ongoing story. There's so much disruption, Keith, this week. Let's move on to Silicon Valley itself. You're suggesting that the numbers are proving that people really are, for the first time, perhaps fleeing the Bay Area.
Yep. This is coming from, call it Job Cities and Buildings. There's three different stories. The first one's about automation, but the second one is about people not wanting to go back to their offices, which includes peak Bay Area was 7 years ago in 2014. But this is from the US Postal Service, which we don't normally quote here on the show, showing that
very high tech, right?
It shows that there are 124,000 address change requests from the San Francisco zip code since the start of COVID, of which 89,000 were moving out of the area, which is a huge number, obviously.
I wonder, I have some anecdotal stuff on that. As you know, I'm looking to buying a place in San Francisco, and it doesn't seem as if the real estate market's being impacted. In fact, I went to see a 3-bedroom Victorian last week that had 90 viewers in a morning. I wonder if it's people not in the real estate market, the less well off who are leaving. Do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, it's probably mainly renters. What this says is that Nob Hill is is the biggest net loser, and that's very wealthy people would be able to rent there. Mission Bay, which is not so wealthy, that's the poorer area. South of Market, which is also a poor area. They all recorded the largest, and the Inner Mission District, which is also poor. So Nob Hill is the unusual one. So I think you've got Keith Raboy moving to Miami was probably Nob Hill.
Yeah, well, we can say as a proud Bay Area person, Keith, we're thrilled you left. Don't slam the door on your way out. The same is true of Peter Thiel. Those people are politically and culturally so repulsive.
And by the way, the biggest,
we can't regret these people leaving, can we, Keith?
Depends who they are. The biggest net gainers were Las Vegas, Florida, and Denver.
Yeah,
so
well, the Times are running, I don't know if you included it, Times are running a lovely piece on Florida, and anyone who's stupid enough to want to live in Florida over the Bay Area deserves to leave. Yeah. What about publishing? Big disruption on that front too, Keith. This is an area you and I have a particular interest in, both I think personally and intellectually and in economic terms.
Yeah, publishing, there's really three big stories this week. The first is that, and this is Ben Thompson reflecting on Twitter acquiring Review. Andreessen Horowitz also announced that it's planning to be a media behemoth.
Yeah, we had that last week. I don't buy that. They're not going to be able to do that. They'd like to be one, but that's not their core business. But the Review stuff's interesting, and I know you've been trying out Review, this new Twitter acquisition, and you're not 100% impressed.
Yeah, this is Review. This is this week's newsletter if I chose to do it in Review. And there's a few features like I can't actually put a hyperlink on these titles and link lower down inside the newsletter to the right section, because it doesn't have a thing called anchors. But it's got this wonderful feature here on the right. This is my Twitter stream, and I can drag one of my tweets and make it a newsletter story. Same with my Feedly feed. I can grab one of those and make it a story. So it's got some nice features.
Very nerdy though, not for normal people like me, Keith. Only for nerds like you.
Yeah, I do think that Twitter moving into newsletter publishing, is a really smart move.
It's a very interesting one. You have a couple of articles on that about how Twitter should become the sort of the platform for the creative community, for audio, for video. But you say they haven't really done a good job in the past. You suggest, or somebody suggests, that they should have bought Substack, that they missed a real opportunity there.
Yeah, Substack is a more mature platform by far. Ghost, which I use, which is you can either host yourself using a server, or you can pay them a subscription, which is what I do, is even more mature. So it combines membership with billing using Stripe, publishing. So Review is the weakest from a feature point of view, and Twitter doesn't have a great history of producing software. It's got a number of failures there. So I worry that they made the wrong acquisition, probably because it was cheaper. Either of the other two would have been better. But that said, they're moving into the space. And I do think if Twitter is a place that creators publish, so for Twitter to have the best tools for creators makes a ton of sense. And
absolutely, yeah. And I think that if they can aggregate these features, these services, to make it a one-stop shop for creators with an audience as well, and a way of monetizing that audience.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I guess Substack could re-engineer Twitter from the outside and become a next generation Twitter. Why doesn't Substack? Why can't Substack attack the market aggressively too?
It can. I mean, look, today we're streaming using Restream, and Restream is doing exactly that. We are publishing live now to Facebook, YouTube. We're also publishing via Periscope to Twitter, and we could be doing it to other places.
So Now TV can be not only the Twitter of the future, but also Substack. We just need a few $100 million, Keith, right?
Exactly.
Any other major disruptions this week? Washington, D.C. has gone back to normal, which is, I don't want to get into politics this week, but that's kind of depressing. Anything else disruptive going on?
Lots of disruptive things going on.
SPACs, I think SPACs are one of your favorite disruptions. What are they up to this week?
So there are, in the IPO market as a whole, the thing being disrupted is the IPO market. So SPACs is one of the disruptions. Another one is direct listings.
Coinbase announced this week they were doing one of their sort of innovative IPOs.
Yeah, they're doing a direct listing, Crunchbase News has a story that says VC could be disrupted by SPACs, which is correct, because what is a SPAC? It's basically a bunch of money, a bit like a VC fund, given to a single company to go public earlier than it normally would. Now, normally VCs are making those investments in those later stage companies. So a SPAC is leapfrogging over the late stage venture capitalists.
But the thing with the SPACs is it's still financed by the insiders. What would be interesting is if the subreddit community aggregated their resources, all sold their silly stock, and started building SPACs of their own.
Very hard because of the rules in the US that you can't have more than 99 investors before you have to declare yourself a public entity.
So Occupy Wall Street, you mentioned that the subreddit people are like Occupy Wall Street. They can't become an alternative Wall Street. You don't think Wall Street ultimately is like the media business and is not as vulnerable as media was in the 90s?
I think there is a path to a world in which private companies get money from individuals. I do think there is a path. Today, it's elite individuals known as angels who can invest in private companies, and are only up to 99 of them.
Do you think ultimately historians in 100 years will look back at the digital revolution and see it through the financial innovation of startups like Google and Facebook and investors and angels and SPACs and all this other stuff? Ultimately, Silicon Valley will be remembered as the thing that created an alternative to capitalism and Wall Street.
I don't know about an alternative to capitalism. I think it is capitalism for sure. We haven't talked about it recently, but Carter, the company Carter, is close to launching something called Carter X, and Carter X will allow private companies to trade their stocks with people like you and me. Coinbase announced today, by the way, that they're selling some of their stocks on what's called the NASDAQ private market before their IPO. So if we had access to the NASDAQ private market, you and I could go and buy shares off Coinbase employees right now. Of course, we don't. We're excluded. So it's institutional buyers are buying them.
Would you take a job at Coinbase now, Keith? Are they a boom or bust company?
I wouldn't take a job anywhere, Andrew. I'm past having a job. I employ myself.
You like me. You're in truth, you're unemployable.
Yeah.
Keith, finally, or two final things, my favorite features of the week. Startup of the week this week?
Clubhouse.
Another disruptor. We forgot about them.
Yeah, Clubhouse just got a big investment from Andreessen Horowitz. It's an interesting, I did my first Clubhouse this week, actually, on one of my companies, Chargify, had a Clubhouse on the future of work with some collaborators, and I was on the stage. And, so Clubhouse has this concept of a stage where the speakers are, and then there's a speaking area where you can come out of the audience and put your hand up, and then there's the audience.
Doesn't sound very disruptive.
It's, I tell you what it would be great for once they start being able to charge is stand-up comedy, attending a comedy club virtually.
Well, that's not very disruptive. Well, I don't understand why this thing now is valued at $1 billion.
It's due to the dramatic growth. So one of my friends, Harry Stebbings, who runs the 20-Minute VC podcast, he has joined Clubhouse recently. He has 650,000 followers on it already. Its scale, it's so huge, and it's basically live audio It's live audio with an audience. Imagine the BBC Radio where the audience can participate.
So it's a tool for creators. Why aren't we on Clubhouse? Who makes the choice on who gets on stage? How many stages are there?
As many as you want. Yeah, I could put us on. Maybe we should do it next week. I'll put us on Clubhouse.
So Clubhouse then is a rival to Facebook and Twitter. It's a media company.
It's a media company. It's very much a platform, but they've got all kinds of rules about what you kind of can't say.
So maybe they're solving also the problem of too much disruption.
I think it's unlikely.
Truth, the disruption of truth and honesty and democracy.
I want to have a separate discussion with you sometime about this word truth and its meaning, but not today because we haven't got time.
Well, I would like a separate discussion next week. Let's focus on Clubhouse. Let's talk it through a bit more. So they're your startup of the week. And what about your tweet of the week, Keith? Finally.
Tweet of the week is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying, after Robinhood closed down trading on AMC, we now need to know more about Robinhood app's decision to block retail investors from purchasing stock while hedge funds are freely able to trade the stock as they see fit. As a member of the Financial Services Committee, I'd support a hearing if necessary. And I just thought we don't often have politicians' tweets, and it's one I agreed with and liked.
Yeah, it's an interesting tweet because I think Ted Cruz agreed with her, and then she came back at him saying, I don't want to have anything to do with you because you backed the mob to murder me. So she's still quite feisty, and she also has enormous media power. I would have thought she'd be a good person to be on Clubhouse.
Right. She would be great on Clubhouse. She probably is on Clubhouse, by the way, because she was on Twitch last night. I watched her talking about this. She's very savvy of new media.
Well, anyone who has a voice these days is savvy of new media, including you and I, Keith. That was the week, and a spectacularly disruptive week. I hope next week is equally disruptive. Have a great week, and I will see you in the first week of February 2021.
And notice I've got a new office this week. I've had my shelves built in.
Very nice. Congrats.